we have, enormous language diversity in this area. The languages that we get requests for, a lot of times people are shocked when they hear that we have this huge, Karen speaking community in Ithaca, or we have a lot of requests for Iraqi Arabic, or we have requests for, people frequently. Potential volunteers will come up to us and say, I speak this language, but I don't see how that could ever be useful to you. Our response to that is always, you never know in an emergency what could be required.
You're listening to Speaking of Language, a podcast recorded at the Language Resource Center at Cornell University. Each week, we explore a topic related to language pedagogy and second language acquisition. This week on Speaking of Language,
we dive into Cornell's Translator-Interpreter program, a student-run organization that offers its services to the surrounding community. Student Executive Board members Dana Slayton, Pearl Ngai, and Ruby Lee join us to discuss what TIP has to offer.
Welcome to a new season of Speaking of Language. I'm Angelica Kramer, the director of the Language Resource Center at Cornell University.
And I'm Sam Lupowitz, the LRC's media manager. We hope the new decade is off to a great start for everybody. We are excited to start our 5th season of Speaking of Language by welcoming 3 Cornell students to the studio.
Dana Slayton, Pearl Ngai, and Ruby Lee are all e-board members of the Translator-Interpreter program.
TIP is a student organization that trains multilingual Cornell students to serve as volunteer translators and interpreters for community agencies in emergency and non-emergency situations.
Welcome to Speaking of Language, Dana, Pearl, and Ruby.
Thank you for having us.
So TIP does a wonderful and very important job of bridging language and cultural barriers, as well as building mutual understanding and community trust. We're so excited to hear more about this program, how you got involved. But first, we want to hear a little bit more about the 3 of you. So can you share with our listeners a little bit about who you are, what your journey with languages is? Do you speak different languages? And what got you interested in TIP?
Hi, everyone. My name is Ruby. I am a current freshman in Dyson School of Business studying Applied Economics and Management. I'm really interested in TIP because I think that I have a very diverse cultural background. I was born in Russia and I am ethnically Chinese. I speak 4 languages: English, Mandarin, Russian, and a dialect in China called Shanghainese.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. What got you interested in TIP?
I'm really interested in TIP because of the opportunity that I get to have to basically connect with many culturally diverse people and students like me, and I really like to make friends. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Pearl, how about you?
Yeah, so my name is Pearl. I'm studying industrial and labor relations here. I'm a sophomore. I speak English, Cantonese, and I think I'm at an intermediate level of Spanish. Something that really speaks to me about TIP and why I chose to join is because it empowers students who have multilingual or bilingual abilities to give back to the community. I think it's a very sort of student-centered program that also enables sort of a conversation about larger language accessibility issues. I think a lot about linguistic privilege in terms of students being able to speak English and other community members in Ithaca maybe not being able to speak English, but they deserve to be seen as people and part of the community at large. So I really enjoy that it's giving students the ability to use their strengths to sort of give back and leverage power in the Ithaca community.
I'm Dana. I'm a sophomore in arts and sciences. I'm a college scholar, which means I don't have a major, so to speak, and I'm primarily focused on research in sociolinguistics and pedagogy of Arabic. And my kind of relationship and journey with languages is it's really a love story more than it is anything else. I've been studying Arabic for about 6.5 years, and I started taking it in high school by complete chance. It was literally a coin flip that got me started with Arabic, and after 2 days, I knew that it was what I wanted to do for like the rest of my life. I can't describe it any other way, and I've just kind of stuck with it since then. So that was kind of the gateway drug for me into linguistics and language issues, so to speak, and it's stuck with me the whole time and been a really important motivator for me getting involved on campus and even getting involved with TIP. My involvement with TIP started during my freshman year when I, like all other freshmen, was just kind of wildly looking for things to do with like my newfound free time. And I saw a flyer for it. And something that had mattered to me a lot in high school was community service, particularly with language. And I used Arabic, and I have experience teaching English as well. And so I was doing both of those things at the same time. I was helping be an informal interpreter for some Coptic refugee communities in my area, and also helping them learn English. And so I loved doing that and wanted to get more involved in the community here in Ithaca, because I think it was hard for me at first to feel like I lived here.
Sure.
It's really hard to feel like you live here, I think, especially as a student. And then I saw a flyer for TIP, and I was like, might as well give this a try. And I went to one of the volunteer training sessions and eventually decided that I wanted to get involved with eBoard, and have stuck with it since. And I love it because I think it's a great way to get people thinking about language and how we talk, and how we talk influences how we interact with others and see the world. And it's also a really good way for students who have these kind of skills and abilities to feel celebrated for them.
Yeah,
because I've definitely had conversations with people since coming here, even who feel like they never really had an outlet for their bilingualism growing up, especially if they grew up in the States and, everything's kind of in English. And if you speak English, then there's no problem. And they feel like through TIP, they've had a chance to kind of access that talent and that skill and that background they have. And that's really great to see.
Maybe you could tell us a little bit about how TIP came about, a little bit of the history.
So it started all in 2000, which I think I was a baby. All three of us were probably babies. I was just born in 2000, so I can't really say that I was there. But in 2000, there was a fire in Ithaca. And the family that was affected by this fire and the house fire only spoke Mandarin. And so they were unable to communicate effectively or basically at all with emergency services. And so a student here who graduated in 2001, her name is Fatuma Sumar, she saw this incident and saw that there was this need in the community. Why weren't these emergency corresponders able to talk effectively or communicate effectively with this family? And that shouldn't be the case, right? So she was originally head of the language expansion program, and so TIP started under LEP. And so what she did was she sent out this survey, so handwritten surveys, and she sent them out to 300 community organization or 300 sort of service-oriented community organizations. And it was a survey to ask them, what are the languages that you are encountering every day, or that the people that are requesting your services are requesting for, right? And the survey results found that at least 25 language needs were not being met in the Ithaca community. So what she did was, it sort of follows the format of what we have today. She trained multilingual and bilingual Cornell students to sort of effectively communicate, translate, and interpret it during emergency and non-emergency cases. And then she also got all of them certified by Cornell professors in order for them to have this sort of certification to tell community organizations like, hey, our faculty say that this person is fluent and capable of interpreting and translating for this given language, and you can trust them. And so, that's sort of how it started. This really unfortunate event was able to inspire a program that is trying to mitigate those sort of situations from happening in the future.
This is wonderful and really important. So can you speak a little bit more about why services like TIP are important to the community, but also to Cornell as an institution, and then to the volunteers that get trained through TIP?
At least in my opinion, I think one of the most important things that we do, aside from the very obvious, meeting a critical need in critical situations, is helping people kind of become more aware of the linguistic diversity of the Ithaca community. Because I think when people think about upstate New York and they think about the central region and they think about where we are in the country, the first thing that pops into your mind isn't, we have a huge unmet language need. The first thing that pops into your mind is like, there are people that live there, like that sort of thing. So I think TIP does a really good job within Cornell and externally through the work that we do of making our student body more aware of the place that they live in. We have, enormous language diversity in this area. The languages that we get requests for, a lot of times people are shocked when they hear that we have this huge, Karen speaking community in Ithaca, or we have a lot of requests for Iraqi Arabic, or we have requests for, people frequently. Potential volunteers will come up to us and say, I speak this language, but I don't see how that could ever be useful to you. And our response to that is always, you never know in an emergency what could what could be required. So I think that's one of the most important things that we do is kind of connect people with the community in that way. And that's both inside of Cornell and outside of it in the kind of work we do, that all of those, whenever we send a volunteer, that volunteer is acting as a representative for our program and for the language they speak and for Cornell and our public service center, and all of those capacities influence how they engage and how language diversity is seen by the broader community here.
About how many languages do you currently have in TIP?
So we have 10 languages currently with TIP, and then we also have 44 volunteers for these languages.
Wow, that's great. How do you build your program? How do you encourage more students to participate?
Basically, we have posters around the campus, and we contact a lot of students who might be interested in languages and know another language other than English. And we ask them to come to one of our volunteer training sessions and to get certified as a volunteer so that they could use their language skills to serve the Cornell community and the local community too.
We have our 4 volunteer training sessions per semester, and we publicize those in the way that Ruby described. We host events for our volunteers, and a lot of times what happens is when we have those social events that are for TIP volunteers, they'll reach out to us saying something like, oh, hey, I have a friend, she speaks Burmese, can I bring her along? And we're always like, oh, sure, because then that's another kind of point of contact for us to reach potential, bilingual students that might be interested in getting involved in the program. And it's really great when we have people that just reach out to us saying, I have a friend who speaks this language. How can I convince them to come to a training session? And I think our faculty are also really important for that, because the faculty is kind of, they have this capacity where they're certifying our students, and they're ensuring that we kind of have the community legitimacy that we need, or our volunteers have the legitimacy they need to perform the work that they do in the community. They're also involved in a lot of times identifying students who can potentially do really well as a translator or interpreter. And a lot of times they have contact with heritage speakers of languages on campus that they can then put in touch with us if we've made that connection with the faculty. So I think that's another really important means of reaching out and building our program.
What are some examples of non-emergency situations where you get requests for translation or interpretation?
We get a lot of sort of like when you have a form that you need to have sort of translated, or often we have like parent-teacher conferences where it's, not, maybe it feels like an emergency to the kid, but it's a non-emergency for the most part. And so in our volunteer training sessions, we have a section where potential volunteers can practice, sort of get a feel for what an interpretation in a non-emergency situation would be. And so a very common case that we do is, maybe a student is struggling in math or something, and the teacher just wants to have a conversation with the parent. And so the interpreter can be there to sort of facilitate a really easy conversation and just to ensure that all the communication is smooth and all the information that needs to be said is communicated clearly.
How has serving on the e-board been beneficial for the three of you?
I think for me at least, it's been really, really good to be on the inside of a service learning program like this to kind of see how the gears turn and how the entire system works together. Because it's not every day or every university even where you can have the experience of seeing how community translation work and community interpretation work happens, like from an insider's perspective. But you definitely get that being on the e-board here. And that's just it's been fascinating to watch, and really something that makes me proud to be a part of it, because you get to see their actual like dividends and relationships being born as a result of this program.
Being a part of eBoard has been really special because I appreciate the opportunity to sort of help facilitate those community programs and sort of like communications and networks. But I also think that like college is so much more about like more than just being in a lecture hall and like absorbing information that someone's like throwing at me. Like I want to be using like what I'm learning in the classroom in a very tangible way. And I think like what better than to join an organization that's trying to have like a net positive in the community. And I feel like I'm using what I'm learning in a productive way. Yep. And like if I can help someone in the process, wouldn't that be so much better? I come from a family where my parents aren't from America, and I'm really grateful and very lucky that they can speak English and they don't feel embarrassed or sort of ashamed by their accents. But I understand that like a lot of people come from families where their parents don't have that, right? And it can be really restricting and sort of suffocating to be in that sort of environment where you don't feel like you're accepted, or people like literally that come to Cornell that are international students that feel that way. So I really appreciate also the opportunity to sort of make people feel at home here, sort of what Dana was saying, like people who speak English might not even feel at home here, but how much more do people who don't speak English as a first language feel that way? So if I can be using like my time to sort of alleviate that fear, like then I will, be all for it. And so I feel like the e-board has been great for that. Yeah.
Aside from the professional stuff, I really appreciate the opportunity for like finding a community like this where I am able to continue expressing like the cultural part of me continuing from high school. Because back in high school, I was the Russian representative of our international council, and I was able to do a lot of the like international events and cultural festivals at school. But then now when I moved here, even though it's a big university and there are lots of people, it was really hard for me at first to find a community where I was able to like find similar people like me. But TIP, I think, is the place that basically makes me feel at home. And I was able to find friends like Pearl and Dana, and also just the volunteer training sessions. I think it's an amazing opportunity to, learn more about languages and how to translate it, interpret it, and to continue developing my language skills.
It's a really good chance to learn to think critically about language and how language works.
Yeah.
Because that's something that we run into frequently when training volunteers, is that there's a big difference between the way you're speaking whatever language it is that you speak with your friends or in a class presentation or with your family, and the way you're speaking it in a translation, in an interpretation context. And you run into all kinds of really interesting issues, and we have really, really good discussions, I think, in those volunteer training sessions about, in my language, when I learned it, we always said the numbers in English, but we say the rest of the sentence in Hindi, stuff like that. Or what do I use, formal pronouns or informal pronouns if someone's really angry? How do I convey that? How do I convey this, or that, or the other emotion, or this hand gesture? All of these questions come up that you never even think about, even as a second, even if you learned the language as a second language, you're not necessarily thinking about as you're using it. So it's really beneficial for that, especially I think all of us as language students or as speakers of other languages can benefit from that consciousness.
What would you tell another student or a friend about why they should join TIP?
You already have the language skill you need. This is a chance for you to do something that takes a relatively small amount of time in terms of getting trained and getting certified. And your case might, only take 4 hours a semester. You might never get a call. You might get called 3 times for a bunch of cases. But regardless, there's discrete instances that are, in the grand scheme of your life, a fairly small amount of time, but you can make a huge impact on someone else's life with a skill that you already have that you might not have even been using in this capacity. And you have a busy schedule. You have this whole, degree that you're working towards. But this is a time for you to take a small amount of time and a skill that you already have and make a huge impact. And through making that impact, I think you'll learn to appreciate yourself more too. And I think that that's really important. And it's good for building community and a sense of belonging.
The huge difference that you make has like such large and long-term effects on that family or that individual. And again, like what I was saying about taking what you're learning outside of the classroom, like we live in such a increasingly globalized community and society that just being a part of this will also help you understand that textbook reading in such a different way, or understand that lecture in a new perspective. And it's also just a great practice in like stepping into someone's shoes. And I would not say that TIP is for people to like do once and then be like, oh, look at me, I'm so great for doing this. But it's more sort of an experience in learning how there are people that are very different from you that are living in the same space. And it's just great to sort of gain that new perspective and have a fuller view of what someone in Ithaca on an everyday basis lives through.
So you guys have mentioned these volunteer training sessions a lot. Where can people find out more about that?
So in order to find out more about our VTS, you can go to campus groups and go to Translator-Interpreter program.
We also have a Facebook page and an Instagram page where we try to post that information. And you will soon be flooded with quarter cards and posters all over campus that are beautiful and list our sessions on there.
And on that website, if there are community agencies who are interested, I presume that's the same location where they can find out more.
Absolutely. We have a
And
portal
we have,
there, too.
we have a different protocol for agencies. We do agency training sessions, which are slightly different because, agencies are a different caliber than an individual student as a volunteer. And we also have to do sort of different legal processes with the agencies. But yeah, they can definitely get in contact. And also I would say our email.
Translator@cornell.edu.
There's always someone that will respond literally immediately to that.
I can attest to that.
Yes. So I think for people who are maybe not on social media, that is also a great resource for them to use. Yeah.
Well, before we sign off, we'd like to ask you to share your favorite word in a language you speak or have learned, are learning, or want to learn. So let's hear it.
In 10th grade, I had a Spanish teacher, and whenever she would ask us about our weekend, if we did something cool, she would always say, "Oh, que guay." And I just thought guay was such a cool word, and it means how cool or how radical.
Okay.
And I just was always like, oh, que guay. Very cool. So that's my favorite phrase in Spanish, yeah.
Arabic is interesting because most words have a kind of a 3-letter or a 3-sound root that forms the basis of their meaning, and then you can derive a bunch of other meanings from that core. But there's a small minority of Arabic words that have these 4-letter roots, and when I discovered that they existed as a freshman in high school, I started collecting them almost. And so I memorized all of these very obscure, weird words just because I thought they sounded fun. My favorite one is probably the word fejfej. Fejfej means loquacious or garrulous. And the word for shivering is tiktika. Which is another one of those, which is funny because it sounds like teeth chattering.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of wild words like that you can just kind of look through a dictionary and get into the point where you get past all the 3-letter roots and get to these bizarre, weird words. And those are my favorites.
My favorite phrase is really common. There's a translation in every language. It's just thank you. In Chinese, it's 谢谢, and in Russian, it's спасибо. And I really like that phrase because I say it on a daily basis and very frequently to every person that I meet. And I think it's a really good way to express your gratitude when somebody do something for you or help you. It's a way to make everybody happy,
That's great.
I love it.
Yeah. It's awesome. Well, thanks so much for speaking of language with us today, Dana, Pearl, and Ruby.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Next week, Camille Andrews will join us in the studio.
Camille is an emerging literacies librarian and will talk to us about the Cornell Makerspace in Man Library, the Manufactory. Until then,
Auf Wiederhören!
The Language Resource Center is located on the ground floor of Stimson Hall on Cornell's main campus in Ithaca, New York. Check us out on the web at lrc.cornell.edu or look for Cornell LRC on Facebook and Twitter.
Speaking of Language is produced by Angelica Kramer and Sam Lupowitz.
Recorded by Sam Lupowitz.
Original music by Sam Lupowitz, Dan Gable, and Joe Gibson.
Thanks also to the College of Arts and Sciences at Cornell University.
As a reminder, the ideas and opinions expressed on this podcast do not reflect those of the College of Arts and Sciences or any other official entity of Cornell University.
We thank our listeners, and do stay tuned for our next episode.